On the eve of my wedding, my fiancée Melissa looked at me with cold eyes and said, "I just spent the night with Daniel." I stood there, holding the custom-made cufflinks she had gifted me, her first love's name hanging in the air between us like a guillotine. She continued, her voice devoid of any emotion, "His back, Robert. The man I truly love. He built an empire while you were content playing house with me. I can't marry a man who has settled." She looked at the simple, comfortable life I had built for her, the life she had begged me for, and called it settling. "No matter how much you adore me," she said, her words cutting deeper than any blade, "you will never be him." I calmly placed the cufflinks on the table, turned around, and walked out of the life we had built. I didn't say a word. I got into my car and made a single phone call. "It's time," I said. "Reactivate everything." Later, as she was celebrating her reunion with Daniel, a news alert flashed across every screen in the exclusive club they were in. A ghost from the financial world had returned. A photograph dominated the screen, me, standing in the center of a bustling trading floor I hadn't visited in 2 years, looking not like a settled man, but like a predator. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes stood beside me, her hand resting confidently on my arm. The headline was simple and devastating: Robert's return, a $10 billion hostile takeover of Daniel's empire. Melissa's phone rang. It was me. Before she could speak, another voice took over the line, a voice that was smooth, powerful, and utterly unfamiliar to her. "Hello, Miss X," the woman said, her tone dripping with amusement. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Margaret, Robert's actual partner. And as of 30 seconds ago, the majority shareholder of your boyfriend's now-defunct company. He settled. We don't." The line went dead, leaving Melissa in a world that had just crumbled around her, built on the lie that I was the one who couldn't compete. I went to the jeweler to retrieve the wedding bands I had commissioned, a matching pair in platinum. In 1 month, it was supposed to be the day Melissa and I got married. Although we had designed them together, the intricate engraving of a willow tree inside the bands had been her specific request, a symbol of the peaceful, rooted life she claimed to want. As I sat in the private viewing room, tracing the delicate lines of the design with my finger, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong. The next second, I heard voices from the hallway, 2 of the shop's senior sales associates speaking in hushed tones. A woman said, "Hey, did you hear? Melissa's old flame, Daniel, just came back to the country. He's the talk of the town after his latest acquisition." Another replied, "I remember when he left for Asia 5 years ago, she was an absolute wreck." The first woman added, "Yes, if Robert hadn't shown up and given her that quiet, stable life she craved, she probably never would have recovered from that heartbreak." The other one said, "Robert, you mean the financial prodigy who just vanished from the scene a couple of years ago? The one they used to call the Wolf of the West End?" It's funny how a man like that, a true shark, completely defanged himself for Melissa. It's a real Taming of the Shrew story, in reverse. Then came a hesitant, cynical laugh. "But now that the real alpha is back, do you think the wedding will actually happen?" "Well, the invitations have already been sent out. If it gets cancelled, Robert will be the biggest joke in the entire city's elite circle." After their voices faded, I looked again at the willow tree engraving and a bitter realization began to dawn on me. It wasn't a symbol of peace, it was a cage. I called Melissa. She didn't answer the phone, but in the background noise of the call before it went to voicemail, I could clearly hear her voice, bright and animated in a way I hadn't heard in months. "He has no real fire in him anymore," she was saying to a group of friends. "He's not worth 1% of Daniel's ambition." Someone else, a more sensible friend, protested, "Come on, Melissa, that's incredibly harsh. He's already more than wealthy enough. Why do you need more ambition? Besides, Robert used to be a legend. He changed his entire life for you. You can't have everything." Melissa gave a cold, dismissive laugh. "Changed, how much? He's been orbiting me for 2 years like some pathetic, devoted puppy. Well, he finally managed to get me to agree to marry him, didn't he?" Another voice asked, "Melissa, don't you actually love Robert?" Her tone turned frigid and cruel. "Would you love a perfectly trained show dog?" There was a stunned pause in the air. Then she sneered, "Because taming a wild wolf and turning it into a loyal dog proves that I'm damn good at training them." I hung up the phone. I stared into the polished surface of the table, at the distorted reflection of the man in a simple, well-tailored but unremarkable suit. And suddenly, I laughed. That naive, obedient version of me, the man I had pretended to be. I've had enough of him. Melissa hadn't come home for an entire week. I contacted a real estate agent and listed the magnificent penthouse apartment I had bought for us. Every single piece of art, every custom furnishing, had been chosen and paid for by me, all to create the tranquil sanctuary she said she dreamed of. And now, I didn't want any of it anymore. After finishing the paperwork, I finally received her call, her voice cool and distant, asking to meet. Even though she was the one who called the meeting, she was still the last to arrive, making a grand entrance at the city's most exclusive restaurant. When she walked in, a tall, slender man stood by her side, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. It was Daniel. He looked somewhat like me, maybe about 50%, the same dark hair and strong jawline, but his eyes held a smugness I never possessed. Daniel held Melissa's hand tightly, as if afraid someone might try to take her from him, his entire posture screaming protective boyfriend. The air in the restaurant instantly grew heavy with unspoken tension. No one dared to speak. Everyone's eyes, from the maitre d' to the other patrons, turned toward me, waiting for the inevitable explosion. I stayed silent, my gaze dropping to the worn red string bracelet on my wrist, its threads almost worn completely through. I tugged at the corner of my lips, a faint, almost invisible smile playing on them. Finally, Melissa walked up to me, her expression a mixture of pity and triumph. "Robert, I'm not getting married." I lifted my eyelids and looked at her calmly, my gaze unreadable. "You're calling off the wedding?" I asked, my voice even. Leaning against Daniel's chest, her eyes filled with a saccharine affection, she said softly, "Daniel's back. I don't want to settle anymore. No matter how much you resemble him, you'll never be him." She added, as if delivering a final, merciful blow, "Do you understand now? I don't love you." I nodded slightly. "Yes." She looked at me, stunned, her brow furrowing in confusion. She hadn't expected me to take it so calmly. She had wanted a scene, a confirmation of her power over me. Then she said, "You know this engagement was arranged by our parents as a business convenience. I loved Daniel for 5 years and waited for him for 2. Now that he's back, I don't have to keep wronging myself anymore." My patience, a resource I had cultivated for 2 long years, was thinning rapidly. I frowned slightly and said, "Okay. You done?" Melissa paused for a few seconds, thrown off by my lack of emotion, before continuing, "My family will handle our side of the public relations. As for yours, you can deal with it yourself. The wedding is off." I replied, "Fine." Then I stood up and started walking toward the door. Just as I reached it, Melissa suddenly called out, her voice sharp, "Robert." I turned around. She was still standing where she was, but I noticed her other hand, hanging by her side, was clenched into a tight, white-knuckled fist. I asked, "Something else?" She frowned, her composure finally cracking. "Don't you have anything to say to me?" I thought for a moment. What I really wanted to say was, "I envy you. Your true love came back to you. Mine never will." But all I said was, "Congratulations on your upcoming wedding." As I closed the heavy oak door behind me, I heard the whispers erupt from inside. "No way, that's it. That's Robert's reaction. Melissa, didn't you say he was crazy in love with you? He looks like he couldn't care less." "Can you shut up already?" Melissa's annoyed voice cut through the noise. I didn't look back. I should have known long ago. No matter how much Melissa resembled her, she'd never truly be her. The real one, my Margaret, would never have left me to fall into someone else's arms. She would have stood by my side and fought the world with me. After walking out of that restaurant, my first stop was a private barbershop I hadn't frequented in 2 years. I had the stylist get rid of the soft, conservative haircut I had maintained for Melissa. When my old, sharper, more ruthless style reappeared in the mirror, it felt like I was finally shedding a costume and becoming myself again. Then, on my wrist, I had a new tattoo inked just below the worn red string bracelet. It was a simple, elegant script, Jene recul jamais. French for I never retreat. It was a promise I had made to someone else, long ago. Finally, I walked into a sleek, imposing skyscraper I hadn't stepped foot in for 2 years, the headquarters of a private equity firm I had built from the ground up. David, my former second-in-command, was in the lobby. He looked at me, his eyes widening in shock, before they reddened almost instantly with a mix of relief and emotion. It took him a long moment to react before he stammered, "Robert." I nodded, a ghost of a smile on my face. "Yes, it's me." He looked me up and down, still dazed, taking in the sharp suit and the confident posture I had abandoned. "Robert, what are you doing here?" My gaze drifted up towards the top floor, to the two corner offices that sat side by side, commanding the most prominent view of the city. One was mine, the other was hers. I smiled faintly. "They're still here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Robert, I clean them myself every single day. They're as good as new. You could take either one back right now. Where do you want to go? Should I tell the team?" I shook my head. "Just bring the bike out. I want to go for a ride alone." He nodded, understanding immediately. "All right." The moment I got on that long-lost motorcycle, a sleek, black machine built for speed, the feelings surged back into me. It had been so long since I'd last ridden. It was almost as if, as long as I stayed off the bike, I could pretend that summer never happened, that the race on the mountain road was just a bad dream. I turned to glance at the other motorcycle parked next to it, a pristine white one, a mirror image of my own. And I thought of her. David followed my gaze, his eyes reddening again. He said quietly, "I've been waiting for Miss Margaret, too. Little Dove has been sitting here untouched. I kept it right beside yours, thinking maybe one day, they both hit the road again together." Then he asked softly, "Robert, it's been 2 years. If I manage to wait long enough for you to come back, do you think she'll come back too?" I froze for a second, the question hitting me like a physical blow. So it really had been 2 years. He said, "Didn't they say if you listen to the clock that runs backwards 1,000 times, you'll see the one you miss? I've already done that, but Margaret still hasn't come back." I turned my head away, the city lights blurring in my vision. My nose stung a little, but I still smiled and said, "It's just something people say to comfort themselves. The dead can't come back to life." Then I started the engine, its roar a familiar and welcome scream. What David didn't know was that I had already listened to that song 10,000 times. I rode all the way up to the mountain peak, the same winding road where our lives had changed forever. Looking down at the sprawling city below, a carpet of glittering diamonds, I shouted into the night, "Margaret, I did everything you told me. I settled down, I started a quiet life, so why haven't you come back? You said you'd show me how you look in a wedding dress. But in the end, I can't even see you anymore." Tears, hot and unwelcome, slid down my cheeks. I muttered to the empty air, "Damn the wind so strong, it's getting in my eyes." On the empty mountaintop, the night stretched out into a sea of stars. The moonlight cast its soft, silvery glow across the land, making everything feel gentle and melancholic again. Behind me, there was a faint rustling sound. I spun around sharply, my heart leaping into my throat, but no one was there. It was only the sound of insects in the tall grass, a lonely chorus in the vast silence. After calming myself down, I rode back down the mountain towards the city. But suddenly, as I neared the garage, I saw it. The white Kawasaki, Little Dove, was gone. "David," I jumped off my bike and shouted toward the shop, my voice raw with panic, "Where's the bike? Who took it?" Then, behind me, a horn blared, a short, sharp sound that cut through the night. My heart started pounding faster than it ever had before, a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. I took a deep, shuddering breath and slowly turned around. Under the dim, flickering streetlight, a woman leaned casually against the white motorcycle. She was dressed in a black, skin-tight racing suit, her sharp, striking features just as wild and defiant as I remembered. It was Margaret. She raised an eyebrow at me, a smirk playing on her lips, and said, "So, how strong is that wind?" Then her smirk widened, her tone teasing and bold, the same tone that had captivated me from the day we met. "Try hard badass, tough mouth, huh?" It felt like time had turned back, to the very first time I met her. My parents had been fighting again, a vicious, screaming match because I refused to follow the path they had laid out for me, to take over their crumbling, old money business. They had berated me for hours that day, calling me a failure. All I did was tell them to stop tormenting each other and just get divorced already. Was that really so wrong? I ran away, trying to process everything alone on a deserted pier. And then, suddenly, I heard a lazy, teasing voice behind me. "Hey, pretty boy, crying out here by yourself." I turned away, irritation in my tone. "Don't talk nonsense. The wind's too strong," it got in my eyes. She gave a small, amused smile. "Try hard badass, tough mouth, huh?" Margaret sat down next to me, resting her chin on one hand and handed me a tissue. She said softly, "Being alone feels heavy, doesn't it? You don't know me and I don't know you, so let me just be a quiet listener. That year, we were both 14. I didn't tell her what had happened. But she sat with me the entire afternoon, a silent, comforting presence. Later, I found out who she was, a student from the public school across town, a troublemaker the teachers didn't like, a so-called delinquent girl. People whispered that she was a bastard child, one without a father since birth. Maybe it was fate. Slowly, we got to know each other. She introduced me to her friends, shared their secret hideout with me, and told me to be unapologetically myself. Because, she said, some people out there will love you just the way you are. When I was upset or fighting with my family, she would appear out of nowhere, telling me I wasn't alone. She even stood up for me, putting those in their place who gossiped about me, saying I was no good. She said, Robert, good and bad are always relative. If your personal choices don't harm anyone or violate what's truly right, then no one has the right to judge you. You are who you are. And I, in turn, defended her, against those who called her a bastard. When she broke down crying, I stayed by her side, held her gently, and let her pour it all out. I told her, Margaret, you don't have to be anything. No one should ever be forced to do what the law doesn't demand. Your existence alone gives meaning. We were like two people drifting in the deep sea, and finally, we found the same piece of driftwood to hold on to. Margaret and I grew closer and closer. After graduating high school, we fell in love. That night, a group of us rode our bikes up the mountain, shouting into the night to celebrate our coming of age. Then, quietly, behind everyone else, I took her hand, and we ran. In that vast night, only our breath and laughter filled the air. She laughed behind me and asked, Robert, doesn't this feel like we're eloping? I still remember that summer, the fullest moon, the brightest stars, the sweetest sound of cicadas, and the most sincere eyes of a young girl. Under the blanket of stars, we hugged and kissed. In that moment, it felt like forever. Margaret, you're finally back? I missed you so much. My voice trembled, and my entire body shook with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming relief. She pushed herself off the motorcycle, her movements fluid and confident. Look at you, all weak and pathetic. I'm right here, aren't I? I rushed forward, my hand outstretched, needing to touch her to believe she was real, only to see David pushing the white motorcycle toward me from the shadows of the garage. Robert, what's wrong? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Didn't Margaret once say it, that her bike and yours would never be alone? When I saw you ride off, I thought I'd better roll out Little Dove and start her up too, keep her ready. Oh. So it had just been my imagination. A hallucination born from grief and a desperate, foolish hope. I turned my back to him, pressing my fingers hard against my brow, trying to compose myself. People say you shouldn't meet someone too dazzling when you're young, because everyone you meet afterward will feel dull and colorless in comparison. I guess I was the one who was too obsessed, too stubborn to let go. 2 years had passed, and I still couldn't face the brutal reality of her absence. Still prayed for a miracle that would never, ever come. When I got home to the cold, empty penthouse, everyone was waiting for me. My mother and father. The moment my mother saw me, not in the subdued attire she had grown accustomed to, but in a sharp, tailored suit that screamed power, she was furious. Look at yourself, what do you even look like now? Not a trace of the respectable man Melissa fell for. No wonder she called off the engagement. I stood at the doorway, the desire to enter the apartment completely evaporating. When I turned to leave, my father's voice barked from behind me, where the hell do you think you're going? Get back here. Call the Harrison family right now and apologize. Tell them it was your fault, that you acted rashly and didn't think things through. Tell them not to take it to heart. He went on, his voice rising with anger, the invitations are already out. You can't just cancel a wedding of this magnitude. And another thing, get rid of that arrogant look on your face. With you looking like this, who would ever trust their daughter to you? I slowly walked up to them, a faint, cold smile touching my lips. Why should I apologize? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. She's the one who said she wouldn't settle, the one who wanted to marry her ex-boyfriend. She's the one who broke off the engagement. I gave them my blessing, so tell me, what did I do wrong? Slap. The sound echoed in the marble foyer. My father shot up from his chair and struck me hard across the face. Idiot, he roared. You're a man and she's a woman, why stoop to her level? She's foolish, and you're even more foolish. Use your damn head for once. Do you really think the Harrison family would let their daughter marry a divorced nobody like Daniel? My face burned with a dull, familiar pain. He continued, his face turning purple with rage, I regret ever letting you manage the family assets. You were supposed to handle things calmly and strategically, but you've ruined everything. Even if she was cheating on you, so what? Everyone in our circle turns a blind eye to that kind of thing. As long as the merger with the Harrison family goes through and you secure our future, what the hell are you so angry about? I tilted my head slightly, my tongue pressing against the inside of my cheek where the skin was split. I gave a small, cold smile. You two can both play your own games, but sorry, I can't live like that. My father's chest heaved violently. He grabbed a heavy crystal glass from the table and hurled it at me. Useless. That filthy girl has been dead for 2 years, and you're still moping around like this. How did I end up with such a worthless son? Then he shouted, Robert, I'll say it again, this marriage will not be cancelled. Even if it kills you, you'll at least secure the Harrison deal for this family first. I didn't manage to dodge the glass. It grazed my face, opening a cut just above my eyebrow. Blood trickled down, warm and sticky. For a brief moment, memories, sharp and painful, struck me all at once. After Margaret fell from that cliff during the race, I sank into a deep, suffocating depression. I tried to take my own life. The servants found me just in time and saved me. My parents said I was ungrateful, that as the son of a wealthy family, living a life surrounded by privilege, how could I afford to fall ill with something as self-indulgent as grief? Maybe they were right. Or maybe not. But just as they never understood me, I could never understand them. I couldn't be like my father, capable of doing anything for self-interest, nor like my mother, always pretending to have feelings she didn't possess. I always believed that a person should have moral boundaries, a code of honor, whether toward employees or toward enemies. And why could I never understand them? Perhaps because, for as long as I could remember, each of them had their own separate lives, their own family outside of our cold, sterile home. So I never understood, if they didn't love each other, why did they bring me into this world? Until the family's core business fell into a deep crisis. Then, they decided I had to marry the daughter of the Harrison clan, Melissa. I refused. And they threw a photo in my face. It was Melissa Harrison. Stop acting like a martyr, they said. If you really don't want to live, then go ahead and die. But do something useful for this family first. I lowered my head and looked at the photo. For a moment, a single, heart-stopping moment, I thought Margaret had come back. They looked so much alike. Especially their eyes, the same shade of defiant green. It was as if a dying man had found one last ray of hope in the darkness. I agreed to meet her, on the condition that my father start transferring control of the family's assets to me. So, to prove that I had matured, that I had moved on, I completely changed my image. I wanted to stay by Melissa's side, because even if it was only for that face, it was enough for me. I never expected Melissa to take the initiative and leave me her contact information. She made the first move, and so we ended up together. Later, I realized she was only using me as a substitute, too. A safe, stable, and adoring replacement for the ambitious man who had left her. We were merely satisfying each other's needs. So when she told me to quit my high-risk ventures, I did. When she asked me to learn how to cook gourmet meals, I learned. When she wanted me to buy a quiet country home, I bought one. She even told me to stop riding motorcycles, and I listened. In the eyes of others, the once rebellious me had turned over a new leaf for her. I loved her so much it had tamed me. Even Melissa herself believed that. What could I say? I was willing to do anything for that face. So even when she crossed my boundaries again and again, I endured it. Because whenever I looked at her, I saw Margaret, as if she were still by my side, never gone. Until the day her true love came back. Her eyes had room for no one else. That's when I finally, brutally, woke up from the dream. No matter how similar she looked, Melissa would never be her. Before going to sleep, I unexpectedly received a call from Melissa. She said, her voice laced with accusation, "Your parents called mine." I remembered that earlier tonight, I had posted the first motorcycle photo I'd shared in 2 years on my private social media. A friend had commented under it, "The wolf is back." Not long after, Melissa had replied to that comment. She wrote, "What kind of woman would even want to date such a man, who's wasting his life on childish hobbies?" So I called her back and said, "Don't worry, this marriage isn't just something you don't want anymore. Still, I couldn't help but feel a bit of regret. I would never again see that gentle, adoring look in her eyes when she gazed at me, even if it was a lie. Melissa was silent. After a while, she gave a cold snort, her tone full of contempt. "Robert, I'm not anyone's accessory. If you want to marry me, you'll have to accept what's between Daniel and me. Don't expect me to belong to only you, understand?" Then she added, "Anyway, this is just to please our parents. Since you love me so much, I can agree to marry you. But that's all." I rubbed the frayed red string bracelet on my wrist and smiled slowly, a real smile this time, but it was cold. I said, "Melissa, if you really plan to marry me, does Daniel know about it?" She didn't answer. I could only hear her uneven, angry breathing. I said, "Melissa, I know you've been using me as a substitute for Daniel. Funny thing is, I've been doing the same. Do you know when you look the most like her?" I nodded to myself, thinking of Margaret's radiant, confident smile. "It's when you don't speak, just look at me. Even though you're really just seeing someone else through me, I honestly don't give a damn. Just looking at that face makes me happy enough." I softened my tone, letting a hint of the old, gentle Robert back into my voice. "So, even though you've made me do a lot of things I never wanted to, I still can't bring myself to be angry at you. But like you said, I'm not him, and even if your faces look alike, you're not the same person. So, we've both been using each other as substitutes. I don't owe you anything, and I don't love you. Let's just call off this marriage." Before I could finish, Melissa abruptly hung up the phone, the silence on the other end more telling than any words. I took 2 tablets of a strong sleeping aid. Only in my dreams can I see Margaret again, and return to those 4 years when we were madly in love, 2 young titans ready to take on the world. After the college entrance exams, with all our friends as witnesses to our burgeoning success, we could finally be together openly. You know that feeling, walking down the street hand in hand with the person you love, the one who is your equal in every way, watching a movie together, even if you don't speak, the air itself tastes sweet with shared ambition and understanding. We could finally ride the motorcycles we loved, speeding freely through the open world, not as escape, but as celebration. David once said, "Robert and Margaret are the most perfect couple I've ever seen. Just standing together, they look like they came straight out of a power broker drama." Margaret had laughed and told him to keep talking, that flattery would get him everywhere. I leaned casually against my bike, watching our friends joke around, my heart full. Later, when we went to the same university, we started a motorcycle team and joined races together, but our real passion was the business world. Honestly, she really was captivating. Her name was always popping up on the dean's list, and after every business plan competition, some venture capitalist would try to recruit her. Afraid that I'd get jealous of the attention, she went straight to the campus radio station that same day and publicly announced our business partnership and our personal relationship to the whole school, declaring us a package deal. Many people said we didn't look like the kind of couple who could last long, that our combined ambition would eventually make us rivals. But who would have thought it would last 4 years, for years of building a small empire from our dorm rooms. My parents finally found out I was in a serious relationship. That day, they called me home, furious, and demanded I break up with that bastard from the wrong side of the tracks. I refused. My father picked up a golf club from his bag to threaten me. I snatched it out of his hand and snapped, "Don't push me to hit back. You both have your own families, and for years you've never cared about me. What right do you have to interfere in my life now? Who the hell do you think you are? I'm sick and tired of your hypocrisy. What am I in your eyes, just a tool to carry on the family name?" My father gritted his teeth and said, "I'm your father. I gave you this life. You'll never escape the fate of being a part of this family." My mother yelled, "We've spoiled you too much. That's why you dare to talk to us like this. Was it that bitch who taught you to say such things?" While she was cursing, Margaret appeared. She had been waiting outside. She stood in front of me, neither humble nor afraid, and said, her voice clear and steady, "All these years, you've never cared for him. He's never known your love, and yet you expect him to repay your kindness. Why? Why should he obey you? He's the person I love most. You may not love him, but I do." My mother, enraged, raised her hand to slap her. Before she could, I shoved her away. That day, I held Margaret's hand and walked out of that house. Neither of us spoke. We just sat there in silence all night in our small apartment. We made a promise, after graduation, we'd get married. But just before graduation, strange things started happening. I was being followed for no reason. Sometimes, during our races, my bike would have mysterious mechanical failures. Margaret began acting distracted, absent-minded. One day, she suddenly asked me, if one day I'm gone, what will you do? I shrugged and said, die with you. I wasn't joking. Before 14, I had no family, no friends, I was rebellious, wild, and lost. I didn't know what it meant to live. Then I met her. She was my salvation. I couldn't imagine what I'd do without Margaret. Don't, she said, shaking her head. Even if I'm gone, you have to live well. Find someone who loves you, get married, have children. Promise me, okay? I pulled her into my arms and smiled. Stop talking nonsense. In this life, the only thing I'll ever do is put a wedding dress on you. I won't marry anyone else. She pouted. Don't joke. I'm serious. I said, why are you being so serious? What's wrong? Don't tell me you found another guy behind my back. She choked up slightly and gave a soft laugh. What are you talking about? Of course not. I grinned. You wouldn't dare. Otherwise, I'd just marry someone else and make you regret it for life. It was just a joke. She poked my forehead, half annoyed, half smiling. If you ever really get married and the bride isn't me, I'll show up in a wedding dress and crash the ceremony. When I proposed to Margaret, she said if I could beat her in the final championship race of the season, she'd marry me. I agreed immediately, promised I'd win, and with that trophy and a ring, proposed to her in front of everyone. But I never imagined that race would be the one she'd never return from. In my dream, the scene shifted into a foggy forest road. When I reached the finish line, I only remembered the deafening cheers, the blazing heat of summer, and the big screen flashing the news that she had fallen off a cliff. Amidst the fire and chaos, in that moment, there was nothing left but silence. I jolted awake, my back drenched in sweat. The phone rang, it was David. Robert, there's a race up on the mountain road. You coming? I said, yeah, I'm coming. It wasn't my usual track, but I figured it was time to move forward. He said, this one's a small race. There'll be a big one in a few days, you in? Dommy and the others already went ahead. Leaning against my bike, I lit a cigarette and said, sure. I need the practice anyway, I'll join. He laughed. I heard a lot of well-known racers are joining, especially this female rider from abroad. She's incredible, but she never takes off her helmet, so no one knows what she looks like. If I meet her, I'll ask for her autograph. I exhaled a cloud of smoke and teased him, look at you, fanboy. I'll just win the trophy for you. David's eyes turned a little red. Robert, seeing you like this? I'm really happy for you. I patted his shoulder. When I took my final drag and turned my head, I saw Melissa. Our eyes met, and I could clearly see the light flicker in hers, a mixture of anger and confusion. Robert. I didn't plan to answer. I crushed out the cigarette. But she grabbed my sleeve. She said, can we talk? She stood in front of me, backlit by a streetlight, her face half hidden in shadow. I looked at her quietly. Such a familiar face. What a pity she wasn't Margaret. Don't look at me like that, Melissa suddenly raised her voice. Robert, how dare you lie to me? She seemed furious, though I couldn't understand why. I only shook off her hand and said slowly, Melissa, shouldn't you be happy? Her brows furrowed, and she blocked my path, angry. Happy? You made me your substitute, and I should be happy. Robert, do you even have a conscience? Her eyes were burning with rage, and she bit her lip, trembling. No wonder you always looked at me like you'd found something you lost. No wonder you'd stare at me all the time. I thought you really loved me. I even foolishly agreed to the arranged marriage between our families. I must have been such an idiot. I waited until she finished, then said quietly, Melissa, weren't you using me as a substitute, too? Your true love's back, you don't need to poison yourself with me anymore. The substitute game was over. She took a step closer, her eyes unwavering. Even if I was a substitute, weren't you trying to move on because of me? Would you have done it for her? I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, no. I remembered what Margaret once said, if the bride isn't me, I'll show up in a wedding dress and crash your wedding. That was the last obsession I allowed myself to keep. Melissa pressed her lips together. So you never liked me at all? I looked straight at her, calm and steady. You don't like me. I don't like you. Isn't that fair? She said. She stopped herself, biting down hard on her lip. Of course it's not fair. Robert, you're nothing but a dog at my side. There are 6 days left until the wedding. You'll regret this. I replied, I won't. After packing my luggage, I boarded a flight to Shanghai for the big race. There were only 4 days left before the wedding. My parents still refused to cancel. I looked down and touched the red string I'd worn for 7 years. I thought, once the race is over, I'll finally sever ties completely with that hollow family. David came to pick me up from the airport. He said, I heard that female racer is staying here too. Maybe we'll run into her. I chuckled. You, her fanboy now. David scratched his head. I just think, some of her moves remind me of Margaret. My heart skipped a beat. Sensing the awkward silence, David quickly changed the subject. When we arrived at the track, I saw many familiar faces. Most of them had been Margaret's friends. There, the white bike. David nudged me and pointed. They were a little far away, but when I looked, that person turned their head, the helmet glinting. Strange. A wave of recognition hit me like lightning. My hands started to tremble. My heart pounded so hard it nearly leapt out of my throat. David shouted, Robert, we're all counting on you. As the countdown began, I locked my eyes on that white motorcycle. Suddenly, I remembered the race from 2 years ago. Before the start, Margaret had said to me, if you can beat me, I'll marry you. The engines roared. I could only see one thing, that white blur ahead of me. I thought, I need an answer. No matter who she is, I have to see the face beneath that helmet. The timer hit 0. I shot forward like an arrow. The wind roared past my ears, a physical force that felt like 1,000 horses charging all at once. I pushed the throttle inch by inch to its absolute limit, my fingertips going numb from the intense vibration, and even my breath carried the bitter, metallic taste of gasoline. The world outside my helmet blurred into a tunnel of gray asphalt and green foliage. The curve loomed ahead, a treacherous bend that had claimed many racers. The screech of rubber scraping against the asphalt sliced through my nerves, a sound that was both terrifying and exhilarating. I leaned into it by pure instinct, my body and the machine becoming one, tilting at an impossible angle, cutting through the bend, and accelerating out with a surge of power. In my eyes, there was only one focal point, that flash of white ahead. Her taillight flickered once in front of me, a taunting red eye in the distance, and I closed the gap, chasing it relentlessly, mercilessly. Every single heartbeat pulsed in a frantic rhythm with that red light. Time seemed to stretch thin, the world fading into a monochrome palette of gray and white, only the deafening roar of the engines filling my ears, my entire consciousness. Just a little closer. A little more. I could almost hear the rush of blood pounding through my veins, a desperate drumbeat urging me forward. On the final, sweeping corner, the most dangerous part of the track, she slowed ever so slightly, a strategic move to take the turn safely. I didn't. In that split second, I didn't know whether I wanted to win the race or just prove that the ghost I was chasing was real. The checkered flag fluttered in the wind, a distant, blurry promise of an ending. I heard voices shouting in the distance, a muffled roar from the crowd that sounded like it was coming from underwater. My tires left long, black, smoking trails on the pavement as I brought the bike to a screeching halt. The whole machine trembled beneath me, shuddering from the exertion. I stopped, the air inside my helmet burning hot and suffocating. Victory, when it came, tasted like gasoline and resurrection. It was a hollow, bitter taste. Until I saw the massive screen at the finish line. It showed my number, my name, in first place. Champion. And the female racer, the one in white, was second. She had a foreign name, one I didn't recognize. We followed the staff backstage, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving a cold, empty void. My jaw tightened as I stepped forward, deliberately blocking her path. I knew it was rude, a breach of racing etiquette, but I had to see her. I had to know. I asked, my voice hoarse and raspy, if she could take off her helmet. She didn't move, just stood there, a silent, still figure in white. Even her silhouette, the way she held herself, was so much like hers. My heart pounded so violently against my ribs I thought it might burst. Finally, after an eternity, she spoke, her voice slightly distorted by the helmet's microphone. I'm sorry. Sorry. In that single moment, everything around me turned cold. The sounds of the cheering crowd, the smell of victory, it all faded into a dull, grey nothingness. So it wasn't her. Of course, it wasn't her. I remembered that summer, Margaret asking me, if I'm gone one day, what will you do? And me, laughing, saying I'd die for her. But I hadn't. I had lived. I had even tried to love someone else. I lowered my head, my lips trembling uncontrollably. That was it. The last, foolish trace of hope I had clung to for 2 long years, gone. Extinguished. I turned to leave, the weight of my grief heavier than ever before. But suddenly, someone grabbed my arm. A firm, strong grip. I looked back, my gaze following from her gloved fingers up the slender wrist of her racing suit, and then I saw it. A red string. Frayed, faded, and tied with the same intricate knot as mine. My mind went completely blank. Then, she lifted her hand, her movements slow and deliberate, and removed her helmet. And I saw the face I had been dreaming of for 2 years, the face I saw every time I closed my eyes. The same sharp curve of her smile. The same defiant spark in her eyes. The same warmth that had saved me all those years ago. Margaret. My Margaret. I missed her so much, but when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. Now I knew what it meant to be so moved, so utterly shattered and rebuilt in an instant, that you can't speak. 2 years had passed, and she looked almost unchanged, yet somehow, she had. There was a new strength in her eyes, a hardness around the edges that hadn't been there before. Otherwise, why were my own eyes blurring with tears? Under the golden lights of the winner's circle, she stood glowing, a halo around her. She squinted at me, a playful, familiar expression on her face. "Try hard, badass," she said playfully, her voice the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "What, pretending you don't know me now?" I couldn't hold it back anymore. I pulled her into my arms, crushing her against me, burying my face in her hair, cursing between my sobs. "Damn it, why did you take so long to come back?" She smiled faintly against my chest. "I heard the try-hard badass was getting married. And the bride wasn't me. So, of course," she said, her voice a soft whisper meant only for me, "I came back to crash the wedding." She hooked her arms around my neck and kissed me, and in that kiss, I could hear it, that subtle tremor and choked breath hidden inside her voice, the echo of her own pain and longing. I held her, tightly, desperately, afraid that if I loosened my grip even a little, I'd wake up and realize this was all just another dream, another hallucination brought on by grief and sleeping pills. I was so tired. So even if this was an illusion, I prayed, let me stay asleep just a little longer. She bit her lip and whispered, "I'm sorry. I promised that if you beat me, I'd marry you, but I broke that promise for 2 years." Her eyes softened, filled with a depth of emotion that mirrored my own. "Do you blame me?" I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. "No. How could I? As long as you came back, I don't need anything else. I just need you." That day, at the awards ceremony, I didn't take the trophy. I offered it to Margaret. As I looked at her, the woman before me, strong and real, overlapped with the girl from all those years ago. A proposal 2 years late. And finally, a perfect ending. That night, in the quiet of our hotel room, we turned all the longing and pain of the past 2 years into movement, again and again, claiming each other through sweat and tears. Even when we were completely exhausted, neither of us wanted to stop, as if stopping would mean letting the other go again. In the end, she lay in my arms, her head on my chest, and finally began to tell me everything that had happened over the years. It was a dramatic, almost absurd story. The reason Margaret and Melissa looked so much alike was because they were truly sisters, half-sisters. Margaret's mother had also been a rich young heiress who fell in love freely with Margaret's father. But Melissa's mother, a woman from a less prominent but ruthlessly ambitious family, interfered. She drugged Margaret's father, got pregnant, and used the scandal to force a marriage, taking her place. Unable to tolerate such a profound betrayal, Margaret's mother left, only to find out later that she was pregnant as well. Later, when Melissa's mother learned of their existence, she secretly used her family's power and influence to suppress them, making their lives a living hell. That constant pressure slowly turned Margaret's mother bitter, filling her with an all-consuming desire for revenge. So she controlled Margaret, ordering her to go abroad to help her uncle's business and to build a power base to strike against the Harrison family. Margaret refused, because of me. She didn't want that life of revenge. So Margaret's mother targeted me instead. Suddenly, those inexplicable times I was followed, the accidents during my races, all made sense. Margaret got scared. She begged her mother not to hurt me. But her mother, now completely consumed by her obsession for vengeance, gave her an ultimatum: leave this place, fake your death, and help me, or I will destroy the man you love. So they staged a fake death on that mountain road. Margaret was taken abroad. For 2 years, she barely slept more than a few hours a day, working relentlessly, just so she could see me sooner. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "You have no idea how much I missed you." She told her story as if it were someone else's, how she struggled to prove herself, how she fought to break free from her mother's control. She hadn't dared to see me or contact me, afraid that doing so would endanger me. She finished her story in just a few dozen minutes, but I could feel the immense weight and hardship of those years. She held me tightly, and I held her even tighter, as if I could merge her into my very bones, protecting her from ever having to leave again. Margaret's voice trembled as she said, "Every time I missed you so much I thought I'd go insane. I'd stab my wrist with the tip of a pen and tell myself, hurry, hurry, Robert is still waiting for me. He said he'd win a trophy for me on the track, that he'd marry me. He's so stubborn, he'll wait for me forever." So I studied like crazy. I learned everything about finance and acquisitions, bit by bit breaking free from her control until I could finally stand before you again. Her tears, which she had held back for so long, dried and flowed again, as if she were releasing all the emotions she had buried for years. I gently caressed her face and pressed a soft, lingering kiss on her forehead. Then I said, my voice thick with emotion, "So Margaret, will you marry me?" 3 days before the scheduled wedding to Melissa, I took Margaret to the city hall to get our marriage certificate. When the heavy steel seal stamped down between our two faces in the photo, officially binding us together, Margaret began to cry even as she smiled. Through her happy sobs, she said, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I came too late." I scrambled to wipe away her tears, cupping her face gently in my hands. I shook my head and said softly, my voice filled with all the love I had held back for 2 long years, "As long as the ending is you, it doesn't matter if you came late." At that very same time, a photo suddenly began to spread like wildfire through our elite social circle. On a sleek, black motorcycle, a slender, fair hand rested confidently against the chest of a racing champion, and his arm was wrapped tightly and possessively around the woman's waist. The screen seemed to overflow with raw, untamed hormones and undeniable chemistry. It was a picture taken right after the race that day, captured by David and the others at the track. No one knew how the photo got out, but within an hour, even people in our community who had no interest in racing had seen it. As soon as someone posted the photo in the main group chat, it exploded with comments. "Wait, doesn't that guy look exactly like Robert? No way, did Robert turn into this now? Could they be long-lost brothers or something?" Then someone added, "This actually looks like how Robert used to be, before he met Melissa." Another chimed in, "That girl in the photo, she kinda looks like Melissa Harrison. Wow, since when did Melissa start riding motorcycles?" Someone else replied, "That's not Melissa, it looks like that mysterious female rider from abroad. Gotta admit though, they look incredible together." Then another, more pointed comment appeared, "But didn't Melissa just tell us yesterday that Robert would regret leaving her before the wedding, that he'd come crawling back, begging her to marry him?" "Ha," someone responded, "so Melissa really thought Robert would die without her. Turns out she was just the stand-in all along." While Margaret was trying on her wedding dress in the presidential suite of our hotel, a dress I had kept safe for 2 years, I got a call from Melissa. Her voice was cold and sharp with fury. "Robert, who is she?" Margaret, overhearing, took the phone from my hand. She looked up at me with a lazy, amused smile, the same one that had always made my heart skip a beat, and said into the receiver, her voice dripping with sweet venom, "Miss Ex-Girlfriend, let me introduce myself. I'm his legal wife." Margaret and I met up with everyone on the mountain road, the place of our supposed tragedy. We rode our beloved bikes, racing all the way to the summit under a sky full of stars. Everyone was laughing and crying at once, a chaotic, beautiful celebration of reunion. From behind me, where she sat on her own bike, she held my hand tightly. It felt just like that summer when we were 18 again, full of hope and defiance. I laughed and said, "Margaret, how about running away with me?" Her eyes shimmered with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. This time, she grabbed my hand, and together we ran through the summer night, leaving our bikes and our friends behind. Margaret tiptoed and kissed the corner of my lips, but I turned the tables, grabbing her waist and pulling her into a deep, lingering kiss. That familiar softness, that wild passion, none of it could compare to the overwhelming joy of finding each other again. It made up for our burning, reckless, romantic, shattered youth, a love that once had no ending. I don't know if what we had was redemption for each other. I only know that in every journey we take, love is the greatest, truest answer. We partied half the night at David's shop, and only fell asleep on couches and chairs when dawn was breaking. When I woke up, everyone was sprawled across the floor in every possible position. I really liked this kind of atmosphere, this found family. I planned to step outside and feel the cool mountain air. But unexpectedly, I saw Melissa. She was sitting under a telephone pole, looking utterly exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. I had no idea when she'd arrived, how long she'd been there, or what she wanted. I didn't want to see her. But she got up and blocked my way before I could turn around. "Robert," she said, her voice hoarse, "let's get married." She pulled a household registration book from her coat, a document needed for marriage registration. I didn't know what kind of desperate game she was playing. I took a step back, raised my left hand to show her the simple, elegant platinum wedding ring on my finger, and said, "Melissa, I'm already married." She froze in place when she heard that, her face draining of all color. Then she asked, her voice trembling with rage, "You married that little rebel girl?" I nodded. She snapped, furious, "How can you marry anyone? You've only known her for a few days. Why can she, but I?" She stopped mid-sentence, her tone softening into a desperate plea. Looking at me quietly, she bit her lip and said, "I haven't told my family to cancel the wedding yet. 2 days from now, let's just go through with it as planned, okay?" I shook my head. "The wedding won't be cancelled. I'll just change the bride." For a second, she was completely stunned. Then she laughed bitterly and scoffed, "If your wife finds out she's just a stand-in for me, she'll definitely divorce you." "Robert, don't be stupid. I'm your best choice." Oh, Melissa didn't know. Margaret was the one I had loved all along. The next second, a woman's voice came from behind me, cool and confident. "Don't worry. We won't be getting divorced." Margaret walked up, wrapped her arm around mine, and tiptoed to press a soft kiss on my lips. Then she said calmly, her eyes locked on Melissa's, "Because those who betray, will go to hell." Staring at the face so similar to her own, yet so different, Melissa said nothing. She just turned and walked away, a lost, broken figure disappearing into the morning mist. The day before the wedding, Wang Corporation, my family's company, and Sue Corporation, the company Margaret now controlled, announced a high-profile, joint hostile acquisition of the Harrison Group, Melissa's family company. Only then did everyone finally realize the full story. The Liu family had an illegitimate daughter living abroad all along. But instead of fighting for inheritance, she and her mother had joined forces for revenge. That day, everyone online was also buzzing about another thing: how much Anna Sue, the mysterious business prodigy, looked like Melissa Harrison. And at that exact moment, I announced that I would marry my first love from my youth, the wedding set for the next day. That's when everyone connected the dots. The mysterious female racer was her. She was my love who had returned from the dead. My father was overjoyed, praising me for being farsighted and brilliant. He said proudly, "You truly take after me, better than the master himself." But that very day, I brought Margaret home and told them that from this moment on, I was cutting all ties with them. I'd never been able to do it before, always tearing myself apart inside. Because I thought, they gave me life. Because deep down, I still had illusions. I wanted their understanding. But coming into this world wasn't my choice. And since I'm already here, I'm my own person. When I was writhing in pain, again and again, they stood at a distance, watching me drown in that dark ocean, never once reaching out to save me. If I can't have it, then I won't want it anymore. After all, not everyone in this world is born with family love. Learning to accept the absence of certain emotions, that too is part of growing up. When I left, my parents stood before me, their faces pale with panic for the first time. But that no longer had anything to do with me. The wedding day. Margaret wore the wedding gown I had prepared long ago, a classic, elegant dress that fit her perfectly. She looked at me and asked, "How did you know I'd come back?" I pinched her cheek gently and smiled. I didn't know if you would, I said, but I reserved the meaning of your return. I wore the suit she had chosen for me all those years ago. Gone was the reckless arrogance of my youth, replaced by a calm maturity and quiet warmth. I wrapped my arms around her from behind. Looking into the mirror at our reflection, my eyes grew slightly red. This day. I had waited too long for it. Margaret turned and kissed the corner of my lips. She teased softly, "Try hard, badass, how strong is the wind this time? Why are your eyes teary again?" That one line, it hit me right in the heart. I'd once imagined her saying that to me at the foot of the mountain, but it had only been an illusion then. Now, that illusion had come true. What was lost had been found again. Heaven had been far too kind to me. I lowered my head and kissed her eyes, smiling as I said, "I was just thinking, there's someone who misses me, someone who'll wait to see the spring rain, the summer wind, the autumn leaves, and the winter snow with me." So even when I was alone, I kept moving forward, fearless. Because I believed that at the end of every cliff, the wild wind still blows. And the one I love will be there, waiting to say, "Hello, we meet again."